Hi everybody, Karis here. Today I'm going to talk to you about something in this video, just a personal thing that's happening, and I will give you fair warning right now that if you're not into the aspect of esoterica that's about beings not from here and extraterrestrial type stuff and multi-dimensional interaction with otherworldly entities, then you're going to think this is just crazy town and we're going to go really deep into it and you're not going to like this. So if I were you, I'd just turn it off and wait for another vlog about something else that more closely aligns with your paradigms that you're interested in opening and expanding, because this is far out stuff. And this is the edge of my own awareness, but for some reason I really felt like I needed to share this experience. I felt like for whatever reason other people are probably going through it too, and I needed to speak about what was happening. So the entity, the being, or rather group of beings, I think, race, that this video is about is Quetzalcoatl. And I have not had any experience with Quetzalcoatl. And that's not even a name that's really in my frontal lobes, right, of thinking about stuff ever. Just because the whole Mesoamerican spiritual pantheon, I don't really know that much about historically, and I haven't really had much of a reason to find out about it. My journeys have taken me to different parts of the world spiritually, right? So I could tell you a lot about Celtic deities, and I could tell you a lot about Native American stuff to a point, but Mesoamerican religions that I didn't know about. So this is excellent because I didn't already have a knowledge base to choose from. So I couldn't have been making this stuff up, which is fantastic. Anyway, so here's what happened. A couple years ago, I had an abduction experience, which wasn't really what people think of. What happened in that particular experience was I was in a space between sleeping and dreaming and felt myself get sucked out of my body, and then before I knew it, I was in this room interacting with these beings that didn't look remotely human. Totally fine. I didn't get operated on. Nobody probed me. I didn't get cut open. Nothing got implanted anywhere in me that time, which I don't really have memories of very much that kind of stuff going on. But I did have these really intense interactions that day. And even at the time of them, and I wrote about them in one of my first two books, I think it was in Journal of the Starseed, pretty sure that that's when I wrote about this, because this was right at the beginning of me perceiving any of this stuff. It was very early. So I was just so shell-shocked that this was even going on. I had no idea how to interpret it. And a lot of times with this crazy, intuitive, multidimensional, experiential stuff, it'll come through and make sense a couple years later. So this is about average, right? Because this first happened in 2010 or 11. It was either late 2010, early 2011 that this particular experience happened. I think it was in springtime of 2011. But I was going to sleep, and all of a sudden, I felt myself get sucked up out of my body, so my physical body didn't go, just my consciousness. And I found myself standing in a room in an almost identical body to this one, in a place that was not here. Super detailed. I became present on this craft in the same way that I always did on this particular craft, which also had physical characteristics which other contactees have described on crafts, things like a spiral staircase, things like an elevator that goes really fast next to a big industrial kind of staircase, next to a spiral staircase, different ways of getting to different levels of the ship. The look of it was very bright and white. It smelled good. It smelled like flowers, kind of like living flowers, which is interesting because it wasn't on a planet anywhere. It was up in a ship. Anyway, so I go into this room, and it's like there's a meeting being held. And there's a long table with a bunch of different looking beings sitting at it. And I was so shocked that I didn't really see the details on a lot of them. Only a couple of them did I see the details of. And by the way, I'd like to stop right now and tell you that I'm visibly, I don't know if you can see it, but I can feel my body shaking and shivering, but I'm not cold. And what that tells me is that's one of my sensory kind of somatic triggers, and I'm right up against a boundary that I've made myself. So I'm right up against one of my own paradigms breaking. So I think it's a really neat time to be recording a video. Usually I do it after I've already got it, but right now I have no idea what's going on. Anyway, so I'm in this room and I start giving this presentation, and so there's a bit of me that's watching everything in my mind saying, what is going on? This is crazy. And there's the other bit of me that's speaking that's totally calm, and like I'm giving a PowerPoint presentation or something to these beings sitting around this long, wooden-seeming council table in this long room with windows on one side of it. And I'm speaking about how the beings on this planet, on Earth, humans, are totally ready for contact, but it has to be personal now. They don't want to hear about somebody else's experience as much. They don't want to see a movie about it anymore or to hear a story about it anymore. In order for people to develop, to be not so quarantined, they need to have personal experiences themselves, which is really interesting because since then, and even at that time, there were lots of UFO sightings. There were lots of people waking up to the fact that they have had communication with beings that are not physical over the course of their entire lives, often benevolent, sometimes malevolent, but usually from the people who I've spoken to, it's been benevolent. So I'm giving this presentation, and then there starts to be feedback from the table. And one of the people giving me feedback is this being that looked kind of reptilian. His skin was green. He didn't have a muzzle like reptiles sometimes have, like a lizard nose mouth thing. His face was flat. I don't remember much of his actual facial structure except that he was super intense. And he had these things coming off the back of his head. I would just like to say again right now that for those of you who don't believe this stuff, I know that I sound completely insane. But me saying that this wasn't real is just the same as me saying there's no such thing as grass sitting next to me right now and no such thing as a tree overhead. And this is what I experienced. So this guy has these things coming up off of his head, super intense, not a sweetheart, like just really intense and kind of critical and almost kind of warlike in his carriage. He wasn't mean or hateful. He was just intense and didn't suffer ambiguity. And he criticized me, he pointed at me with these funny hands. I think he only had 3 fingers and they were like shaped like claws. And he was not indicative of the population there. He was the only one that I remember that looked like that. The rest of them looked different. A lot of them looked like humans. Some of them looked very different. I don't really remember at this point. I could go back into it and find out, but that's not important right now. So he points at me and he said something along the lines of, "We can't listen to her. She's not a valid source of information. Look at her. She doesn't even fully believe that she's even here right now." And I'm standing there in, this really crazy mental space where I'm experiencing all this stuff. And I'm looking at him like, touche, dude. I don't. I don't fully believe that I'm here right now. This is pushing me pretty hard. And then sitting next to me, because I had sat down at the table at this point, again, is this woman who looked very human, who looked at me and smiled and radiated all of this love toward me and soothed me. And I was like, well, whatever. I said what I had to say, and you can believe it or not. So that was the experience on the ship that day. I think more stuff happened, but that's the important part for this particular story, because I think this video is probably going to be pretty long. I'd like to shorten it. And I come back, write it down, write the book, whatever. About a year and a half later, my ex-husband and I were eating dinner or lunch or something at a Mexican restaurant. And I hadn't thought about this in months, right? Definitely a long time. We go to check out at the restaurant, and on the counter are these little clay painted statues of men from the lower central Southern America culture, not Southern, but South American culture, dressed in these really interesting costumes with these big feathers going back, with these things on their hands and with points on their fingers. And I got shocked to the bone, and I realized that they were dressed like that guy that I saw. So they didn't look exactly like him, but I saw the similarities, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're emulating him. That's what it was in my perspective at that moment. And it was one of those jaw-dropping, breath-catching kind of realizations, because it hadn't been up by my conscious awareness, but I got triggered when looking at them. The coloring was completely different. There were obviously people wearing costumes. They didn't actually look like him, but it was similar enough to be able to say that's what they're doing. And so that was that day. I didn't really unpack it much after that. And then just for the past couple of days, I've actually been playing over and over a song that a friend of mine who is staying in that part of the world sent me. And I'll actually put the link to it below this video. There's a plane overhead. Don't know what that means, but anyway. So I'll put the link to it in this video, and it's this gorgeous video that has all these beautiful images, and the words, the lyrics to the song are purely expansive and activating. And so I've been listening to this thing probably 5 or 10 times a day and watching the video and feeling myself just get activated and joyful, and feeling parts of me kind of click into place, which you'll probably feel too if you watch it. It's a really good song. And I'm realizing then now that I think that it's resonating because yesterday and today I've had really interesting experiences, and actually the day before that too, with a being that's around. right? And those of you who are intuitive understand what that's like. It's like you're just not alone. You're trying to figure out who that is. Now, if it was a physical human that you walked into a room and they were kind of around a corner, you might not feel alone, and they would come walking in and you'd say, oh, that's what it was. Kind of the same feeling as being watched. You can be in a crowd of people and all of a sudden you'll feel watched and you'll look up and meet the eyes of the exact person who happened to be looking at you. It's just a natural thing. So there's this being around, and then early this morning, I saw the figure of it. It came through an intuitive way. I definitely saw it with my eyes. Actually, the leaves of this tree made it up. And if you're used to doing shamanistic journeys, or if you're used to interacting with elemental spirits, you'll know how sometimes bark or leaves or patterns in water or patterns in even concrete carpet or popcorn on the ceiling can make beings that are trying to pop through from other dimensions. That's how your brain shows you that they're there, is it kind of makes this pattern around you. I don't think that they're necessarily making the pattern. I think that it's one of the very complex ways in which our brains access our right brain intuitive and mix it with our left brain understanding. So anyway, I'm looking out the window and I see this really specific shape of a person, a being, with things coming back off his head and the classic profile picture that's in Mesoamerican art, talking about their deities and their spiritual experiences. And I was looking at him and I was like, wow, what's that? And then Quetzalcoatl came into my mind, just, right? I have not thought of that word in years. It's been a while. I haven't thought of anything that spoke of him. I haven't researched anything about that type of spirituality. All I've been doing is listening to the song. And so I think what it might be is that it brings in the vibration of whatever ascended master happened to be interacting with the people in that part of the world, because the song is very spiritual. So bringing up the spirituality of this place and connecting it with this deity, right, which is just someone who reached some stage of enlightenment and tried to pass it on to the people, but then people end up worshiping this being because they kind of get out of line and stuff. But anyway, so Quetzalcoatl came into my mind super strongly, and so I look up Quetzalcoatl on Wikipedia. I'm laying in bed this morning looking it up on Wikipedia like a mad woman, and I saw that it means feathered serpent. And I thought back about my time on the ship, and sure enough, the dude looked like some type of reptilian-ish being with feathers, not feathers like bird feathers, but feathers the way cactus is like a leaf. So thicker and harder, but definitely feather-ish. And I realized that, oh my goodness, that's the deity, that's the thing that taught those humans in that part of the world how to evolve and how to ascend. And for whatever reason, it's coming to me right now. And I also was looking at the information about the first art that's been found having to do with this being and things like this, and I saw the classic image that's often used in ancient astronaut theory of this guy sitting in what the caption of the photo said was a shamanistic journey, but to me it looked like someone wearing a spacesuit sitting in a craft. I mean, you probably know what I'm talking about if you're exposed to all of these type of things. It was another one of those images. And over the craft is this serpent head that's kind of watching over. And so I don't really know how to break that apart yet and interpret it. It's still, like I said, at the edge of my awareness. This is just today that these things are happening. But I will say that I am feeling a big convergence of a bunch of evolved beings. Buddha's been coming to mind, Kuan Yin, Christ, all of these things, because I think there's this big cleansing going on that's been happening with all the solar flares and alignments and stuff, and it's helping us expand. So that's my experience with Quetzalcoatl. He's hanging around. I don't really know what's going on other than I'm getting activations and stuff. Maybe some of you guys are having similar experiences. I'm really not sure. But I do know that when I researched him, the name was Feathered Serpent. I do think it's a class of beings, a race of beings. I don't think it's just one. I think that, for all we know, they intermarried with humans, and so that's maybe why the one I saw looked more human-like with arms and legs and stuff, whereas in the really ancient stories of Quetzalcoatl, they just drew him as a serpent with no human characteristics. I'm really not sure. Feels benevolent and nice. I'm not scared or anything, but it's definitely something that's hanging about. And maybe you guys are having some interesting experiences too. I'd love to hear about it. And like I said, I will put that video link for you in the info because it's really beautiful. You'll probably like it. Anyway, go in peace. Have a great day. I don't have any excuse for this other than saying that I know it sounds like crazy town. For those of you who don't know this kind of thing goes on, that's okay with me. Whatever, you do what you do. Anyway, I'll talk to you again very soon.